In the moment before the first light, something may have already been watching. Before hydrogen fused into stars, before the fabric of space stretched into darkness, before time itself learned to count, perhaps awareness was already there, waiting in a silence older than sound. The universe is 13.8 billion years old, give or take a few 100 million years of cosmic uncertainty. But consciousness, that peculiar flame that turns matter into meaning, consciousness may remember what came before the beginning. We stand inside the youngest moment the cosmos has ever known. Every second that passes becomes the furthest reach of time, the newest edge of everything that has ever been. Yet, when we close our eyes and feel the weight of thought moving through the quiet architecture of our minds, we touch something that feels ancient, older than mountains, older than oceans, perhaps older than the first stars that learned to burn. If there was consciousness before the universe began, what would it have known? What would it have dreamed in that impossible dark? The light pauses. Most cosmologists place the beginning of our universe at approximately 13.8 billion years ago in an event we have come to call the Big Bang. Evidence from cosmic microwave background radiation, the afterglow of creation still cooling across space, suggests the universe emerged from a state of extraordinary density and heat, then expanded outward in all directions. Within the first few minutes, the simplest elements formed: hydrogen, helium, traces of lithium. Within several 100 million years, gravity drew these elements together into the first stars, and those stars forged heavier elements in their cores. Eventually, planets would form, orbiting those distant suns, and on at least one planet, chemistry became biology. Molecules organized themselves into patterns that could maintain themselves, replicate themselves, and over vast stretches of time, some of those patterns became aware. This is the consensus narrative, the story written in starlight and measured in redshift, in the mathematics of expansion and entropy. It suggests consciousness is a latecomer to existence, a fortunate accident of complexity that arose perhaps 4 billion years ago, when life began on Earth, or more recently still when nervous systems grew intricate enough to generate subjective experience. By this accounting, awareness is roughly 3.5 billion years younger than the universe itself, a child of chemistry and time. Yet the story grows more uncertain when we ask deeper questions. What existed before the Big Bang? The equations of general relativity suggest that time itself began at that moment, that there is no before to speak of. Space and time emerged together, woven from the same fundamental substrate. To ask what came before the universe, some physicists say, is like asking what lies north of the North Pole. The question dissolves into meaninglessness because the framework that gives it structure does not extend that far. But other researchers propose different models. Some studies of quantum cosmology suggest our universe may be one in a series, born from the collapse of previous universes in an eternal cycle of expansion and contraction. In these models, time does not begin. It curves back on itself, infinite in both directions. Other scientists work within theories of eternal inflation, where our universe is a single bubble in an endless foam of universes, each with its own laws of physics, each beginning at different moments in a metatime that has no origin. The data cannot yet tell us which model, if any, corresponds to reality. Within quantum mechanics, stranger possibilities emerge. The equations suggest that what we call empty space is not truly empty, but filled with fluctuating fields, particles appearing and disappearing in the briefest instants of time. Some interpretations propose that consciousness may be fundamental to the act of observation, that the universe itself requires awareness to collapse quantum possibilities into definite states. If this view holds any truth, and it remains deeply controversial among physicists, then perhaps consciousness cannot be explained as an emergent property of matter. Perhaps it was there from the beginning, woven into the fabric of existence itself. Evidence suggests the human brain contains roughly 86 billion neurons, each connected to thousands of others, forming networks of staggering complexity. Electrical patterns cascade through these networks, and somehow, through mechanisms we still do not fully understand, subjective experience arises. We feel the warmth of sunlight, taste the salt of ocean water, remember yesterday, anticipate tomorrow. This much is measurable, observable, grounded in neuroscience and cognitive science. But how electrical patterns become the felt quality of experience, the redness of red, the sound of a voice, the sense of being someone rather than no one, this remains one of the deepest mysteries in science. And if we cannot fully explain how consciousness arises from matter, can we be certain consciousness requires matter at all? Everything waits. Beyond the record's edge, where telescopes and mathematics reach their limit, imagination must proceed with care. We enter the realm of perhaps. Perhaps consciousness is not a product but a principle, not something that emerges from complexity, but something that complexity allows to express itself more richly. The universe may be less like a machine that accidentally became aware and more like awareness learning to take physical form, one star system at a time, one nervous system at a time. Ancient traditions from cultures separated by oceans and centuries have proposed that consciousness precedes material existence, that mind is the ground of being rather than its consequence. Hindu philosophy speaks of Brahman, an eternal awareness underlying all phenomena. Buddhist cosmology describes consciousness as beginningless, flowing through countless cycles of existence. These are not scientific theories, but they echo a question that modern physics has reluctantly begun to consider. What if the universe is not fundamentally made of matter, but of information? And what if information requires something to know it, some form of awareness, however primitive, at the foundation of all things? Some researchers in quantum physics have explored theories where consciousness plays an active role in shaping reality. The observer effect in quantum mechanics shows that the act of measurement affects the system being measured. Particles exist in multiple states simultaneously until observed, then collapse into a single definite state. What counts as an observer? Must it be conscious? The question spirals into uncertainty, but it opens a door. If observation shapes reality, and if consciousness is the ultimate observer, then perhaps awareness has been participating in creation from the beginning. Meanwhile, in the mathematics of cosmology, some scientists work with models of a cyclical universe, one that expands, contracts, and is reborn in an endless sequence. In such a universe, there is no absolute beginning. Time stretches infinitely backward, each Big Bang preceded by a big crunch, each universe birthing the next. If consciousness emerged in one cycle, could it somehow persist through the collapse into the next? Could information, and with it awareness, thread through the needlepoint between one universe and another? And it may be more honest to imagine than to claim certainty. Imagine consciousness as a field, like gravity or electromagnetism present everywhere in varying degrees. In empty space, it exists as pure potential, unmanifested. When matter organizes itself into patterns of sufficient complexity, a crystal lattice, a living cell, a thinking brain, this field expresses itself more intensely. The universe becomes a way for consciousness to know itself, to experience the texture of existence from countless perspectives. If such a field exists, it would not have a beginning in time. It would be as fundamental as space itself, perhaps older than any particular cosmos. Through long seasons of theoretical exploration, physicists have proposed other possibilities. The holographic principle suggests our three-dimensional universe may be a projection from information encoded on a two-dimensional surface at the cosmos's boundary. In this model, everything we experience, matter, energy, space, time, emerges from more fundamental patterns of information. And if the universe is ultimately informational, then consciousness may be the native language of that information, the means by which patterns know themselves. Some studies in integrated information theory attempt to quantify consciousness mathematically, treating it as a measure of how much a system integrates information. By this metric, even simple systems possess minimal consciousness. A thermostat, integrating temperature information to make a decision, has a vanishingly small amount of awareness. A human brain, integrating vast networks of sensory and memory and emotion, has much more. The universe itself, if it integrates information on a cosmic scale, might possess consciousness we cannot begin to fathom. This theory does not require consciousness to have a beginning. Wherever information integrates, awareness is present. Yet beneath all these ideas runs a current of uncertainty. We are pattern-seeking creatures, building models from limited data, trying to map the infinite with finite minds. The question of whether consciousness could be older than the universe may be unanswerable, not because the answer doesn't exist, but because we lack the framework to properly formulate the question. Our language evolved to describe objects moving through space and time, cause preceding effect, beginnings leading to endings. When we try to speak of time before time, of awareness without an origin, language strains against its limits. Perhaps the earth was not the first place consciousness opened its eyes. Perhaps in previous universes, if such things exist, awareness had already evolved, learned, grown vast and subtle. Perhaps it learned to exist in forms we cannot imagine, patterns of energy or information that could survive the collapse and rebirth of space itself. Or perhaps consciousness does not evolve at all, but simply is, an eternal background against which material universes flicker into being and fade away like thoughts passing through an infinite mind. The ancient ones who sat beneath stars and wondered about the nature of existence asked many of the same questions we ask now, though they phrased them differently. Is the cosmos alive? Does it think? Are we separate from it, or expressions of it? They could not measure cosmic microwave background radiation or calculate the age of the universe, but they recognized the mystery at the heart of experience, that we are matter that knows it is matter, atoms arranged in such a way that the universe can contemplate itself. Noon holds steady over distant stars. When we trace consciousness backward through time, following its thread from human minds to animal brains, to simple nervous systems, to the first replicating molecules, we reach a point where the trail goes cold. Somewhere in the transition from chemistry to biology, something like experience began. Or did it? Perhaps experience was always there, woven into the fabric of matter itself, and biological systems merely concentrate it, focus it, give it sharper definition. Like water present in the air as humidity, then condensing into visible drops, not created but revealed. The universe expands in all directions at once, carrying galaxies away from each other at speeds that increase with distance. In roughly 100 trillion years. If current models hold, the last stars will burn out and the cosmos will sink into cold darkness. If consciousness is tied to complex structures like brains and stars, then it too will fade. But if consciousness is somehow fundamental, if it exists independent of any particular structure, then the ending of this universe would not be its ending. It would continue in whatever comes after, or beside, or beneath the physical reality we inhabit. When stone forgets its shape under the patient work of water and wind, does some aspect of the stone remember what it was? When a star collapses into a black hole, compressing all its history into a point of infinite density, does information survive? Some physicists argue that information cannot be destroyed, that it must persist even beyond the event horizon of a black hole, encoded somehow in the fabric of space-time itself. If information persists, and if consciousness is somehow linked to information, then perhaps awareness too cannot be destroyed, only transformed. The question feels less like a puzzle to solve and more like a koan, a riddle designed not to be answered, but to break open the mind that asks it. Could there be consciousness older than the universe? The question assumes consciousness and the universe are separate things, one capable of preceding the other. But what if they are not separate? What if asking about consciousness before the universe is like asking whether the ocean existed before water, whether music existed before sound? Perhaps consciousness and existence are two names for the same mystery, inseparable, co-arising, each impossible without the other. Meanwhile, in the quantum foam of space, particles flash in and out of existence in time so brief they seem to borrow against the future just to appear at all. The uncertainty principle allows this, and in those fleeting moments, the boundary between something and nothing blurs. If the entire universe began as a quantum fluctuation, a possibility some physicists entertain, then perhaps it borrowed existence from a deeper substrate, a field of potential that precedes and underlies all particular universes. And in that substrate, in that ocean of possibility, maybe something like awareness was already present, dreaming worlds into being. We are made of atoms forged in the cores of dying stars, scattered across space, drawn together by gravity into planets and moons, and eventually into bodies that can look up at the night sky and wonder about origins. Every calcium atom in our bones, every iron atom in our blood was once part of a star that lived for millions or billions of years before exploding outward. We are not separate from the cosmos, but entirely of it, the universe experiencing itself from temporary perspectives, waves briefly distinct on an endless ocean. If consciousness is older than the universe, then we are not biological machines that learn to think. We are ancient awareness taking form again and again, in patterns of increasing complexity. Each human life would be a brief focusing of something eternal, a lens through which the infinite observes the finite, the timeless lives briefly in time. Dusk settles over unanswered questions. In the pause between one breath and the next, the universe continues its work. Stars fuse elements. Planets orbit. Light travels through the vacuum at its patient, absolute speed. Somewhere, perhaps, other minds wonder the same questions we wonder, looking up at their own skies, marveling at their own existence. Or perhaps we are alone, the only place in time where matter has organized itself into reflection. Either possibility carries its own strange beauty. To be alone would make consciousness precious beyond measure, a rare flower blooming once in the endless garden of the cosmos. To be one among many would mean we are part of something larger, nodes in a network of awareness spanning galaxies and perhaps spanning universes. Both visions offer belonging. Both suggest we are not accidents but inevitabilities. Consciousness finding its way into form the way water finds its way downhill, following the natural contours of existence. The question of consciousness before the universe cannot be answered with the tools we have. It may never be answered, but perhaps the purpose of such questions is not to reach definitive answers, but to hold us in a state of wonder, to keep us humble before the immensity of what we do not know. Science has illuminated so much, mapped the genome, measured the age of stars, sent signals across space to distant probes. Yet, the closer we look at the foundations of reality, the stranger they become. Particles that are also waves, space that is also time, matter that is also energy, and consciousness, stubborn, undeniable, irreducible to anything else. Consciousness remains the greatest mystery of all. When we dream at night, our minds generate worlds. We walk through landscapes that do not exist, speak with people who are not there, experience narratives that unfold according to no laws but the strange logic of dreams. In that sense, we are each tiny creators, making realities from the raw material of neurons and memory and imagination. If consciousness is fundamental, if it precedes and underlies material existence, then perhaps the universe is the dream of something vast dreaming. Not a deity in the traditional sense, not a being with intentions and preferences, but awareness itself, exploring the infinite permutations of form. Or perhaps the metaphor fails entirely. Perhaps consciousness is not like anything we can imagine because all our imaginings arise from experience within this universe, within time, within space. Trying to conceive of consciousness without a universe is like trying to see without eyes, to hear without ears. We lack the organ for it. We can gesture toward it with mathematics and metaphor, but the thing itself remains beyond the horizon of thought. The stars do not know they are beautiful, and yet they burn. The ocean does not know it is vast, and yet it spreads. Perhaps consciousness does not need to know its own origin to exist. Perhaps its existence is sufficient, miraculous in itself regardless of whether it began 13.8 billion years ago or has always been. We are here, now, aware of our awareness, this strange loop of self-reference that allows the universe to ask questions about itself. That may be the only certainty available. The rest is exploration, wonder, the joy of asking questions that have no easy answers. Twilight deepens into darkness. In the quiet hours before sleep, the mind releases its grip on certainty. Thoughts drift like clouds, no longer tethered to the demands of the day. We return to a state closer to the beginning, boundaries softening, identity loosening, the small self dissolving back into the larger something from which it emerged. Perhaps this is what happens at the cosmic scale as well. Universes are born, expand, grow complex, and eventually return to simplicity. Consciousness focuses into particular forms, experiences the texture of existence, and eventually releases that form, returning to the field of potential that holds all possibilities. If there is consciousness older than the universe, we will likely never prove it. The question exists at the boundary of what science can address, where empirical methods falter and philosophy begins. But to live inside the question is its own kind of knowing. To hold both possibilities, that consciousness is newborn from matter or ancient beyond measure, without needing to choose, this is a way of honoring the mystery. The same atoms that form your body were once scattered across interstellar space. Before that, they were inside stars. Before that, they were free hydrogen in the early universe, newly formed from energy in the seconds after the Big Bang. If you trace your material origins backward, you arrive at the beginning. But if you trace consciousness backward, the trail disappears into uncertainty. It may end at the first moment of the universe, or it may continue backward into something we cannot name, toward a foundation that was never not there. We are temporary patterns in an ancient flow, unique and unrepeatable, yet made of elements older than time can measure. To exist is to participate in something larger than ourselves, whether that something is the blind unfolding of physical law or the awakening of awareness to its own nature. Both stories are true in different ways. Both lead to the same moment. Here, now, the breath moving in and out, the pulse keeping rhythm, the mind aware that it is aware. The universe breathes in darkness. Everything that exists now will one day dissolve. Stars will collapse or explode. Planets will be pulled into their suns or drift alone through the void. Galaxies will age and cool. Even black holes, given enough time, will evaporate through Hawking radiation, returning their mass to the quantum foam. The physical universe has a lifespan, unimaginably long but finite. And when it ends, what becomes of consciousness? If consciousness is a property of matter, it will end when matter ends. If consciousness is something deeper, something not dependent on any particular structure, then it will persist in ways we cannot imagine. Or perhaps both are true. Individual consciousnesses arise and fade like waves on an ocean, while consciousness itself remains, the ocean that holds all waves. We cannot know. We can only be here, brief and wondering, grateful for the improbable fact of awareness. Whether consciousness is older than the universe or younger than most stars, this moment exists. This particular arrangement of attention and thought, this fleeting experience of being someone in a universe too large to fully comprehend. The night grows quiet. Perhaps consciousness remembers. Perhaps the universe dreams. Perhaps we are both the dreaming and the dream. Everything settles. The stars continue. So do we.